West Kingston, late 1970s, a world of zinc-fenced slums and political warfare. In the ghetto of Tivoli Gardens, gangsters carried guns for politicians, and elections were decided with bullets as much as ballots. This is the environment Lester Lloyd Coke, also known as Jim Brown, grew up in. He was a ruthless enforcer for the Jamaica Labour Party, JLP, patrolling Tivoli's maze of cinderblock lanes with an M16 in hand. The gang he led would come to be known, fittingly, as the Shower Posse. Some say the name came from political promises to shower supporters with gifts. Others swear it referred to how they showered their rivals with bullets. In truth, both meanings fit. Lester Coke himself christened the gang Posse because he loved cowboy westerns, and Shower after a famous line in JLP leader Edward Seaga's speeches. Blessings will shower from the sky and money going jingle in your pocket. From this, the Shower Posse was born, baptized in the fire of Jamaica's street politics. This was the bloodiest era Jamaica had ever seen. The 1980 general election between Prime Minister Michael Manley's Socialist People's National Party, PNP, and Seaga's conservative JLP party turned Kingston's neighborhoods into war zones. Over 800 people were killed amid the political vendettas that year.
It's calm now, but at election time there's bloodshed across this line. And within these two enclaves, all authority rests with a series of street corner dons, and their role in the social structure of this city should not be underestimated.
The perpetrators were often street crews like Coke's Tivoli-based crew, armed with knives and small-caliber pistols. Now, almost overnight, they walked around with brand-new M16s, AR-15s, and Uzis. So many that talk spread of CIA involvement.
Look, the guys who are being arrested, who are being shot down by the police, who are walking on the street corner with their guns, they have no source of foreign exchange. They have no basis, no earnings on which to pay out hundreds, indeed thousands of Jamaican dollars to get a gun. Somebody is giving them that. Somebody is giving them that for a purpose, for a cause.
After Claude Massop, a Jamaican political activist associated with the JLP, was cut down in a hail of police gunfire in 1979, Coke stepped into the vacuum like a man who had been waiting his whole life, tightening his grip on Tivoli Gardens and molding its young rude boys into a disciplined army, loyal to Edward Seaga and the Jamaica Labour Party. Their job was simple and deadly: defend the territory from People's National Party gunmen and make sure every hungry soul in the ghetto voted the right way. But Coke didn't just play the game, he rewrote the rules. By the dawn of the 1980s, Tivoli Gardens was Coke's kingdom, and he ruled through fear and favor.
No one was more powerful than Jim Brown, the original yardie. Tivoli was Jim Brown's yard. Here he was revered.
For helping secure Seaga's election victory in 1980, Coke and his posse expected to be rewarded handsomely. The JLP had promised to uplift ghettos like Tivoli, but those promises rang hollow. As Seaga's government imposed IMF austerity and slashed social programs, the poor got poorer. Then, under U.S. pressure, Seaga turned on Jamaica's old ganja trade, burning marijuana fields across the island to prove his anti-drug stance. The countryside economy collapsed further, but where the government saw an anti-drug campaign, Coke saw an opportunity. Marijuana had been the rude boys' cash crop exported by the ton to American smokers. Now, with ganja fields raised and Colombian cartels looking for new routes, Jamaican gangsters like Coke simply switched products. They forged alliances with Colombian cocaine traffickers and made Jamaica a prime transshipment point for cocaine flowing from South America to the United States. Jamaica's strategic spot in the Caribbean, a straight line from Colombia to Miami, made it a smuggler's paradise. The only catch: the local Jamaican market for cocaine was limited, but just a short plane ride away, the U.S. demand was limitless. Coke and his Shower Posse possemen cast their gaze northward. In 1984, Lester Coke's violent exploits finally drew too much heat at home. That spring, in a Kingston slum called Rema, he led a punitive raid that would become infamous. Word had been floating through the alleys for weeks. JLP supporters in Rema felt that Seaga's government favored Tivoli Gardens with money and jobs, while their own streets stayed hungry. And hunger in Kingston didn't just mean empty stomachs. It meant men with guns and wounded pride. Some of those men started threatening to defect to the rival PNP if their pockets didn't get heavier soon. The word got back to Coke, the man who watched too many cowboy movies and believed every city needed a sheriff. Only in his version of the story, the sheriff carried an M16, and the law came from the barrel of a gun. Coke decided to make a bloody example out of them. Before the sun rose on that morning in May, Lester Coke gathered his soldiers from the Shower Posse. The men moved like shadows through the narrow lanes of Rema, rifles slung across their shoulders, boots crunching softly against broken concrete. They surrounded two houses where the suspected traitors lived. Someone splashed gasoline along the wooden doors and cracked windows. The smell cut through the cool morning air like a warning nobody was going to hear in time. Then came the fire. Flames spread up the walls and crawled across the rooftops as smoke poured into the dark sky. Panicked families stumbled coughing into the street, eyes burning. And that's when the gunfire started. Automatic rifles cracked through the dawn like thunder rolling across the ghetto. Bullets tore through the crowd, dropping bodies in the dirt before the flames had time to die down. By sunrise, 7 people lay dead in the street. The message made clear: loyalty wasn't negotiable and betrayal would be met with blood. That Rema Massacre was too much even for Coke's political patrons. Prime Minister Seaga suddenly realized the monster he had created. His chief enforcer was now slaughtering fellow JLP supporters who stepped out of line. Facing public outrage, Jamaican authorities finally issued a warrant for Coke's arrest in mid-1984. But Coke was unfazed. In October 1984, even with murder charges hanging over him, he coolly walked into Kingston's airport and boarded a plane to Miami. No questions asked. Whether through bribery, high-placed friends, or sheer audacity, the Don simply slipped out of Jamaica. It was time for Lester Coke to export his empire to America. When Coke stepped off the plane in Florida, he must have felt like he'd entered a gangster's paradise. Miami in the 1980s was a neon-lit boomtown awash in cocaine and cash. Glitzy high-rises were springing up, financed by drug dollars. Fast boats roared across Biscayne Bay carrying bales of Colombian coke. For a man who came from the tight concrete corridors of Tivoli Gardens, it felt like stepping into a dream built by hustlers. Miami wasn't just a city. It was a gold rush where the gold came wrapped in plastic bricks. But if Miami was paradise, it was a violent one, and Coke was about to add to its bloody lore. He had been in the U.S. only 6 weeks before he was involved in a high-profile crime. On a late night in November 1984, Coke and a hit squad of Shower Posse gunmen stormed into a crack house and executed everyone they found, 5 people in total. According to witnesses, even a pregnant woman begged for her life on her knees. Regardless, Coke's men gunned her down along with her unborn child. It was a massacre so vicious it shocked veteran Miami detectives, and it announced, in no uncertain terms, that the Shower Posse had arrived in America. Behind Coke's raw brutality was the strategic mind of Vivian Blake, the posse's co-founder. Blake, a West Kingston native 10 years Coke's junior, had been raised out of poverty by a scholarship to a Catholic school. He immigrated to New York City in the early 1970s, where he learned the drug trade on the streets of the Bronx. By the time Coke touched down in Miami, Blake had already established Jamaican drug pipelines there, and in New York and even Toronto. He was the brains of the operation. Years earlier, on a trip to New York City with a touring Jamaican cricket team, Blake had seen the immense profit potential in the American market and alerted Coke back home. With Coke's firepower and Blake's business acumen, the Shower Posse expanded aggressively into the Miami crack trade, then up the eastern seaboard. By 1985, the shadow of the Shower Posse had stretched far beyond the humid streets of Miami. What started as a Kingston crew loyal to Lester Lloyd Coke was turning into something bigger, something American law enforcement had never quite seen before. They opened up shop in Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, Kansas City, Chicago, Los Angeles, and more.
In Boston, in Miami, in Washington, D.C., Jamaican gangs are known to be responsible for at least 800 murders around the country. The horror is overwhelming. In January, 5 people were shot execution style, one after another in suburban Washington. A 6th survived.
In the cocaine wars of the Reagan era, brutality wasn't just survival. For the Shower Posse, it was a business strategy. Coke and Blake's followers, now thousands of miles from Kingston, continued to live by the gun.
These people are absolutely the most vicious, organized crime group in the United States today.
Flush with Colombian cocaine, the Shower Posse muscled in on established drug turf, sparking conflict with local gangs and even other Jamaican posses. The thing about the streets is this: when men leave home, they might change cities, but they bring their wars with them.
They would not really trust any of the local Americans here to work. What they would do is recruit their own people from back in Jamaica, in the Kingston area, surrounding neighborhoods. They would bring their own people up here to the United States using false passports or green cards for whatever reason to travel. Bring them here, and the new people that would arrive would now become the workers on the street actually selling the drugs.
Men tied to the Shower Posse were still connected to the Jamaica Labor Party, the same political machine that ruled strongholds like Tivoli Gardens. Across the island, another crew stood on the opposite side of that divide. The Spangler Posse, a gang tied to neighborhoods loyal to the People's National Party. The hatred between those factions had already soaked Kingston's streets in blood during the political wars of the 1970s and early 80s. And with them both in America now, the feud continued. In the summer of 1985, South Florida's reggae scene became a killing field. On a humid night in Fort Lauderdale, a popular dance hall party at the Firemen's Benevolent Hall was in full swing when Shower Posse hitmen burst in. Without warning, they opened fire on the packed crowd, sending dancers diving for cover. Their target was the DJ, a selector affiliated with the rival Spangler Posse. 3 innocent partygoers were hit by stray bullets. The DJ himself died in a pool of his own blood. The dance hall fell silent except for screams and the echo of gunfire. It was a message hit, a warning to any who dared side with the Spanglers. That same year, just weeks later, the carnage repeated at a daytime family picnic in Oakland, New Jersey, attended by some 2,000 Jamaican expatriates. A dispute between crews turned the tranquil park into a war zone, as gunmen from the Shower Posse and their allies traded heavy gunfire with the Dog Posse and Tel Aviv Posse, rivals from Boston and New York. When the smoke cleared on the picnic grounds strewn with spent shells, 2 men lay dead, including the Dog Posse's leader, and nearly 24 more were wounded. There was no such thing as a safe place once the Shower Posse started moving through a city. In Miami's Bunch Park, families lined the edges of a dusty soccer field. Kids laughed, music drifted through the air. But the streets don't stay still for long. Somewhere between a pass and a goal, the shooters pulled up. No warning, just gunfire. They missed their intended mark but struck down a rising pro soccer star, Colin Fowles, in front of horrified spectators. Fowles, once a player for the Fort Lauderdale Strikers, bled to death on the grass. He wasn't part of the war, but the war didn't care. By the time the sirens came, it was already over. Not even the entertainment world was spared. In 1987, Shower Posse shooters riddled a nightclub in Broward County with bullets, killing yet another DJ with alleged ties to a rival gang and wounding bystanders. Screams replaced the music, blood replaced the drinks, and just like that, another night in South Florida turned into a crime scene. The Shower Posse didn't believe in boundaries. If you were anywhere near their war, you were already in it. Federal agents in Miami began warning local police that a new ultra-violent cartel had seized South Florida.
This is textbook for them, the indiscriminate shooting in a crowded area where there are bystanders or innocent people. They're out to send a message.
And what message is that?
That they're not to be messed with.
By the late 1980s, the streets weren't just crowded. They were choking on money, drugs, and ambition. And when too many wolves start circling the same territory, sooner or later, somebody gets torn apart. Up in Philadelphia, the tension was already boiling. The projects in Southwest Philly had turned into open-air markets where crack ruled everything. Corners, loyalties, even life itself.
There are plenty of street corners in West Philadelphia, and many of them are virtually corner stores for a lucrative drug market. Police say the fight for control of prime real estate, which can rent for $3,000 a day, has sparked a turf war in Philadelphia, West Philly in particular.
That's where the Shower Posse ran headfirst into one of America's most deadliest crews, the Junior Black Mafia. This led to Southwest Philly turning into a combat zone. Meanwhile, back in Jamaica, the violence continued. In one grim episode after Lester Coke was abroad, his teenage son Mark Ja T helped run things at home. But in February 1992, Ja T was ambushed and shot dead by gunmen from a rival crew known as the Black Roses. The assassination of the Don's heir ignited 2 weeks of furious fighting in Kingston. A dozen people were slain in tit-for-tat murders across the city. The cycle of vengeance seemed endless, stretching from the Caribbean to North America. Yet, even the most feared gunmen eventually meet a bullet or a cell, and by the end of the 1980s, the walls were closing in around the Shower Posse's leaders. By 1988, after nearly a decade of mayhem, American authorities had seen enough.
Posse members in 21 U.S. cities were arrested. The roundups are continuing, and when it's over, authorities hope to have some 400 people in custody. Law enforcement officials say the posses are responsible for 1,400 drug-related homicides in recent years.
In September 1988, a federal grand jury in Miami handed down a sweeping RICO indictment against the gang's hierarchy. 34 members of the Shower Posse were charged, including Vivian Blake and Lester Jim Brown Coke himself. Blake's two half-brothers, Tony Bruce and Errol Duke Hussing, who ran the posse's bustling New York operations, were also named in the indictment. Word of the crackdown spread, leading to panic through the Shower Posse's circle. Authorities in New Jersey launched a coordinated raid the next month. 53 posse members were arrested across New Jersey cities like Newark, East Orange, and Camden, effectively dismantling the gang's mid-Atlantic network. The American dream was crumbling for the Shower Posse, and the founders faced the prospect of spending life behind U.S. bars. But Vivian Blake was nothing if not cunning. As agents closed in, Blake managed a Hollywood-style escape. He slipped out of Miami disguised as a tourist and strolled onto a cruise ship bound for Jamaica. When the ship docked in Ocho Rios, Blake vanished into the familiar embrace of his Kingston stronghold. There, he lived openly for years, protected by a lack of extradition and the lingering influence of his political connections. Lester Coke, meanwhile, had been deported from the U.S. back to Jamaica in 1987 on minor immigration charges before the RICO indictment came down. Safe on home soil, Jim Brown Coke believed himself untouchable and often acted like it. In one incident after his return, he got into a traffic dispute with a minibus driver. The hot-headed Coke chased the man murdering him in front of witnesses. That sense of invincibility was short-lived. In 1989, Jamaican voters threw out Seaga's government, removing the Shower Posse's chief protector from power. The new administration, led by Michael Manley, had less reason to shield Coke. By 1990, under growing U.S. pressure and with evidence piling up, Jamaican authorities finally moved to extradite Lester Coke for his many alleged crimes in America, including drug trafficking and the Miami Crack House Massacre. The kingpin who had dodged justice for so long was cornered at last. In early 1992, Jamaican police arrested Coke on the U.S. extradition warrant. While he awaited transfer to Miami, his empire was unraveling, but Coke never lived to see an American courtroom. In the pre-dawn hours of February 23, 1992, a mysterious fire broke out in Coke's prison cell. By the time guards got to him, flames had engulfed the cell. Coke suffered horrendous burns and was rushed to the hospital, where he died en route under suspicious circumstances. He was 43 years old. Officially, a stray mattress fire had ended the reign of Jamaica's most feared gang lord. But few believed it was an accident. Many suspected Coke had been silenced, assassinated to ensure he could never testify about the cozy relationship between Jamaican politicians and gangsters. Whether powerful figures arranged his death or it was a desperate escape plan gone wrong, some say he set the fire himself, hoping to overwhelm guards and flee. The result was the same. Lester Jim Brown Coke was gone, taking his darkest secrets with him. The passing of Jim Brown marked the end of an era. At his funeral in Kingston, 40,000 people poured into the streets to pay respect. It was like a state funeral for a fallen general. Ironically, the man leading the procession was Edward Seaga himself, the former prime minister walking solemnly behind the coffin of the gang boss who had once done his bidding. Seaga defended his attendants by calling Coke a protector of the community, a final nod to the blurred lines of politics and crime in Jamaica. With Coke dead and Blake on the run, the Shower Posse's power structure crumbled. By the mid-1990s, U.S. law enforcement believed the posse was effectively extinct as a major threat. Vivian Blake's luck ran out later in the 1990s as well. In 1999, after a decade in hiding, Blake was finally extradited from Jamaica to the United States to face racketeering and drug charges. He pleaded guilty in 2000 and was sentenced to 28 years in federal prison. However, his story had one last twist. Through cooperation or good behavior, Blake secured an early release after serving only 8 years. In 2009, he was deported back to Jamaica, a free man, though in failing health. The man who had once unleashed a crack cocaine flood on American streets spent his final days quietly in Kingston, writing a screenplay about his life. He died of natural causes in March 2010, at age 53, suffering from kidney disease. 30 years after Lester Lloyd Coke and Vivian Blake first turned the streets into shooting galleries, the empire they built finally collapsed under the same violence that made it famous. The Shower Posse had once been feared from Kingston to Miami to New York City, their name tied by lawmen to over 1,000 murders during the crack era, a crew born as political pawns in Jamaica's Cold War streets that evolved into a ruthless, globe-spanning machine built on cocaine, cash, and corpses. They flooded neighborhoods, leaving behind blood-soaked corners. No rules, no mercy, just death waiting around every corner. But in the end, the same brutality that carried them to power dragged them down, and though the empire faded, the echo of their gunfire still lingers.